When I first moved into the small apartment on Maple Avenue, I had no idea that place would end up changing my life. My name's Emily Carter, and at the time, I was 28, single, and struggling to hold everything together. I had just lost my job at the design firm where I'd worked for 4 years after the company downsized. My savings were almost gone, and my rent was due in 2 weeks. I spent most of my days applying for jobs online, sitting at my small kitchen table with my laptop, a cup of coffee, and a notebook filled with rejected applications. My landlord, Mr. Daniel Harris, lived in the same building. He was in his late 40s, a quiet man who always kept the property in perfect condition. We'd only spoken a few times since I'd moved in, usually when I dropped off rent or when he came by to fix something. As the rent deadline crept closer, I felt the weight of panic building. I hadn't told anyone how bad things were getting, not my parents, who lived out of state, not my best friend, Samantha, who was busy planning her wedding, and definitely not Daniel. I tried to stay positive, telling myself something would come through. But deep down, I was scared. One afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Daniel standing there, holding a clipboard. "Hey, Emily," he said with his usual calm tone. "Just checking the smoke detectors today. Shouldn't take long." I let him in, and while he worked, I couldn't help but notice how meticulous he was, testing each alarm, replacing batteries, making notes. When he was done, he looked up and asked kindly, "Everything else okay around here?" I hesitated before replying. "Yeah, everything's fine," I said, forcing a smile. But Daniel wasn't fooled. "You sure? You've seemed a bit down lately." I sighed. "Just job hunting. It's been rough." He nodded thoughtfully, then said, "If you ever need help, or if you're running into trouble with rent or anything, don't be afraid to tell me." That moment caught me off guard. Most landlords I'd met before were distant, but there was something genuine in his tone. I thanked him and promised I'd be okay. Still, that night I sat awake, wondering how long I could really hold out. A week later, I received another rejection email. It was the 10th one that month. My rent was due in 3 days, and I had only $70 in my account. I sat staring at my computer, tears welling up. Then I heard another knock. It was Daniel again. "Emily," he began gently, "I was checking the payment records and noticed you haven't submitted this month's rent yet." My heart sank. "I know, I'm so sorry," I said quickly. "I've been trying to get work, but it's been slow. I promise I'll pay you as soon as I can." He was quiet for a moment before saying, "Come downstairs for a minute. I have an idea." I followed him to his small office on the ground floor. It was tidy and filled with tools, invoices, and keys. Daniel motioned for me to sit. "Listen," he said, "I know what it's like to struggle. When I started out, I was barely scraping by. I had someone help me when I needed it most, and I've never forgotten that. So here's what I'm offering. I've been trying to renovate the extra unit in the basement. It's a mess, and I could use some help organizing and painting. You've got an eye for design, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I do. Then how about this, you help me fix up that unit, and I'll knock off this month's rent." "Deal." I was stunned. "You'd really do that?" He smiled warmly. "Of course. You help me, I help you. Fair trade." I felt a rush of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Daniel." I don't even know what to say. The next morning, I put on my old work clothes and met Daniel downstairs. The basement apartment was dusty and cluttered, but it had potential: exposed brick, large windows, and plenty of light. We started sorting through old boxes and cleaning. I suggested color schemes and rearranged furniture while Daniel handled repairs. We worked side by side for days, laughing over paint spills and coffee breaks. By the end of the week, the space looked completely different. It was fresh, modern, and warm. Daniel seemed impressed. "You really have a gift, Emily," he said. "This looks better than I imagined." I smiled, feeling proud for the first time in months. "Thank you. It feels good to do something again." As time passed, Daniel offered me a part-time position helping him manage other units, designing layouts, choosing paint colors, and even staging apartments for new tenants. Slowly, I started earning again. One evening, after finishing a project, Daniel handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a check for my work, far more than I expected. "You earned it," he said simply. Tears filled my eyes. "You don't know how much this means to me," I whispered. He smiled softly. "Maybe I do." Over the following months, I rebuilt my confidence. I saved money, found freelance design clients, and eventually landed a stable job with a new firm. But I never forgot what Daniel did for me. A year later, I stood in front of that same apartment building, now managing several of Daniel's properties as his partner in business. We'd turned the place into something special, affordable housing that felt like home for everyone who lived there. That simple act of kindness had changed the direction of my life. I realized that sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, help can come from the most unexpected places. And as I looked at the building, filled with laughter, warmth, and life, I thought about how one person's compassion had given me a second chance. I was broke and desperate, I whispered to myself, but my landlord's offer didn't just change my situation, it changed me.